Hello, my name is Luba Vangelova, and I am the founder of The Hub. I am joined today by Pam Laricchia, and over to you, Pam, to introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks so much, Luba. I'm really excited to chat with you. I am, I guess, a homeschooling parent. Way back in 2002, my kids decided to leave school once I discovered homeschooling was a thing. So they are all adults now. And I just really enjoyed diving into our lives and seeing how it unfolded for them. And, my kind of systems brain just really enjoyed thinking about and putting together how it worked for them and how their interests folded into things, how their learning happened. Like so much so I've written like 5 books about our experience. I host a community with other homeschooling parents to chat about the whole journey. So really, that's kind of my background. Parent of 3, dove into homeschooling, love the experience so much that I enjoy sharing it.
All right. And so we're going to talk about screen time and specifically video games today from the perspective of a parent who's gone through this with several kids and has heard many of the concerns out there expressed by many parents. So I'm sure you're familiar with the terms that are often used. Parents worrying that quote unquote all my child wants to do is play video games, or if they were left to follow their interests, they wouldn't do anything but play video games and so on. But before we get to that, let's talk about kind of screen time and how screen time relates to video games and kind of deconstructing so that we're using the appropriate terms for each instance. So what are your thoughts when you hear screen time? Like, what is your reaction when you hear parents worrying about quote unquote screen time before we get to video games specifically?
And I think what I'm going to talk about here also applies to video games. So I'll link it through that way. But for me, the interesting thing when someone comes with worries about screen time is like the first thing I like to ask is just, well, what are they doing on the screens? Because screens are really a tool. They're not an interest. They're not like interested in screens, right? They are interested in using this tool to do various things. So it's those other things that describe their interest in what they're doing. So instead of talking about, my kid has too much screen time, I need to limit their screen time. Instead, it's so helpful to think about, well, what are they doing? So are they playing video games? Are they texting, messaging with friends? Are they watching videos? Are they on YouTube? YouTube's another thing. Like, I love YouTube or I love video games, but be specific. That is really the most valuable thing because what we're talking about right now really is a parent-child relationship, right? And how do we want to understand our child, support our child, help them do the things that they find super interesting. And I think the thread that will come through our whole conversation is understanding the details helps you understand who your child is and the things that they're interested in. Oh my gosh, like we can connect with them and support them and like support their learning, support just their development of who they are as a person by knowing who they are, right? Understanding the things that they like to do, helping them accomplish the things that they're wanting to do. But if we stand back and we just call it screen time, or we just call it YouTube, because there's videos about everything on YouTube, or we just call it video games, there is a wide range of genres and things that someone can enjoy about playing video games. Like those are just so superficial as terms to describe what our child is doing that they really add no value to us, right? And no place to really make a connection with our child. Like to help them feel seen and heard, we need to understand what it is they're doing, the joy that they're getting out of it, the things that they're learning, the frustrations they're having, so that we can help them process and move through those moments, and feel seen and heard and loved for who they are, versus like just standing back with those big labels of screen time, YouTube, video games, whatever, pick poison.
Mhm. So does that presuppose that the child is willing to tell their parent what they're doing? And, what if the child is either just tends to be very private about what they're doing? Like how would you recommend a parent find this out if it's not a child who naturally like, hey, I was just doing this and doing that and the other.
Yeah, like, I mean, that can be a wide range. It can be, maybe what you want to be doing is cultivating that trust in the relationship that they can share without seeing the parents' eyes roll because they're talking about a video game again.
Mm,
Or, they're like, oh my gosh, if I go tell them this really cool thing that happened in my video game, they'll look at their watch and they'll say, it's already been an hour, you've been playing it. Are you ready to get off now? Right? Like nobody wants to come and tell you something when they know they're going to get that kind of negative feedback. So that is always an interesting thing just to check in with ourselves and to, um, figure out like is our priority? What are our priorities? Is our relationship the priority? Do I want to connect? Do I want to understand who this person is in my life? Versus kind of that vision in my head of the perfect child that I think I need to mold and fix and correct, versus the amazing child that's right there in front of me.
mm,
And then you can also have some kids, people are just more private, right?
mhm,
They're not big talkers. They're not external processors. They're internal processors, right? So it could be that as well. And I have one of those, a couple of those internal processors. And the fascinating thing is we can pick up, like, talking conversations aren't the only way to gain information. Number one, I can ask, oh, do you mind if I sit and watch for a while? That looks really fun. And at first, if they're worried about being judged, they may not say yes at the moment, but just because they say no, like, and don't take that personally, like, that's just more information. Oh, they're not comfortable with me doing that yet. Give space and time for that depth of trust to develop and grow. And then maybe they'll invite you. Maybe they see when you've asked a few times and you just said, oh, okay, and you haven't come back at them, 5 minutes later with, how many hours has it been, etc. Like with all the judgment pieces, then they will start to trust that you're actually curious, that you weren't just using it as a maneuver to, get in there and say, okay, look, you finished that level, time to shut it down. Let's go do something else. Right. So that trust in the relationship, really needs to be there to be able to engage with them about it.
mhm,
So you can ask to go sit and watch. If you hear cheers happening, you can go and say, oh, sounds like something really cool happened. What was it? You could just express an interest without the expectation that they then all of a sudden tell you all the things. You may notice, it depends on how old your child is. Maybe you're downloading the game for them. Maybe you're like, back when my kids were younger, I was buying the games for them. So I would know the titles, right? So I could learn a little bit about the game, right? On the internet there, I can find out what genre it is, kind of watch a little bit of gameplay on YouTube, watching Let's Plays. So you could be kind of in parallel, understanding a bit about the game. So you might ask, you might say, oh, yeah, I watched a bit. Like, how excited would the child be if you're watching a Let's Play about a game that they're enjoying playing right now? And you say, oh, I watched somebody play level 1 and that boss looked really hard. Or, whatever genre it is, you can be learning alongside them so that you can connect. It doesn't mean that this has to all of a sudden become your interest, but your child is your interest, right? You want to connect and engage with them and understand what is the joy that they're getting. Because if they're choosing to play video games, they are invested in it. They are interested in it. They are learning things. They're picking things up. And for you to understand your child, it is so helpful to know those pieces. And so it may not be just sitting down and engaging directly in conversation, but so it'll be noticing the things that they're picking up, noticing which games they play longer and which ones they don't. Noticing, even if it's in conversations with friends that you happen to pass by and hear what they're talking about. Because remember I was saying earlier about how video games isn't detailed enough to understand, like saying my child's interested in video games. That's very little information about the child, really. What is it they love? Are they playing RPGs and they love the stories? Are they playing yeah, deeper games like that and really enjoying the music? Are they really into platforms? So it's like the skill that they really enjoy, having the hand-eye coordination and the challenge of having all the different levels. Are they more into MMOs and they really like the group play? They like to be with other people. Are they playing Fortnite? There is just so much information that we can learn outside of literally sitting down and having a conversation with them. Does that make
So,
sense?
yes. So for the parents who are not to themselves in the kind of gaming universe, can you just define some of these terms, RPGs and MMOs?
Role-playing games. So those ones are very story oriented. You're kind of usually part of a party. I mean, there's just so much in there too, like navigation skills, map skills. You usually have to go to a shop to buy, your armor and your equipment and leveling up. Like there's a lot of math and data management in there, understanding bosses at the end of each level and just figuring out patterns and how you're going to beat them and like it's just a wealth of information. And MMOs are massively multiplayer online games, so your World of Warcrafts and your Final Fantasy 14, your Guild Wars 2, like all those. So maybe they really enjoy the social aspect and they love hanging out with other groups of people online while they play.
Mhm.
Like understanding the games that they're playing and the pieces of them that they enjoy the most.
Mm,
That helps you understand, like, where's their mind at? What are the pieces? Because if they have that space to play
mhm,
and play in the way they're drawn to, you will learn the skills that they are interested in picking up right now, right? And what that does, not that you're trying to get them away from the game, but you can, for me, it's always about opening up their world. It's always about bringing more into their world.
mhm,
So, if you find they're just going to certain places in that MMO because they love the music, maybe that kind of music you can find in other places and bring more of that. If it's a social engagement, maybe you can find other social engagement opportunities that will give them that same kind of enjoyment, right? That same hit of joy.
mhm,
Like just even if you're just watching them play, seeing when their eyes light up,
mm,
seeing the things, and it's not about avoiding frustration. Like in fact, if you notice the frustration and see them, they'll still push through. They don't just give up and quit, but they push through, and that is something that they want to achieve. That is something that they want to figure out, even if they're going back to that boss for the 30th time, right? Just to see their determination, their choice to keep going back to it, even when we're like, oh, take a break. I would give up on it by this point. Then I remember there were times when I would be searching walkthroughs for them, and just back then it was ordering game guides and magazines, right? So nowadays, maybe it's finding walkthroughs on YouTube, somebody showing how to navigate certain bosses or certain levels or certain platforms, just when you bring that information to them, They can decide if they're interested or whether they want to figure it out by themselves. That's
Mhm.
another really interesting thing to observe and notice about your child right now. And if you're bringing them information, you are telling them without having to literally say that, I support you. I see you trying so hard to figure this out. I want to help you accomplish the things that you're wanting to accomplish. And like there's another subtle message that would help them feel more comfortable coming to you to talk. Like you've given them some stuff, 2 days later, they finally win that battle. Then chances are they come back and say, I finally did it. Yay. And you can celebrate with them. Because for me, fundamentally, it is all about the relationship because the relationship is something that's going to last a lifetime between us. So maybe right now in this season, the love is video games, right? But, a few years from now, maybe it's something else. And my support and love, I don't want to be attached to my judgment of the thing that they love doing right now.
Mhm.
I want to use that to learn more about them and support them because what I've done is created a pattern and their trust in me that whenever they're interested in something, I will help them. I will support them. I will celebrate, the high points of it. I will commiserate with them in the low points of it. And in this season, it happens to be video games. But also understanding it to such a depth that you have that language that you can talk to them is, I mean, for me, it's priceless because then I see the child in front of me. I see who they are. They feel seen and heard by me. And like I was talking about before, that trust that comes with it. Those are the things that we bring forward with us, no matter their age,
Mhm.
right? That's the kind of relationship I wanted to have with my kids.
So it's so interesting that the same activity can be viewed in such very different ways through very different lenses, based on what is already in the perceiver's head. Um, so one person may see a child, quote unquote, wasting time and going nowhere in life. I mean, I'm just articulating, I think, some of the
Yes.
thoughts that go through parents' heads. Well, and I see them actually articulated in some instances. And then someone else may see this child is very determined. They are building resilience. They are building, fortitude, grit, all these things that like we extol as virtues and as useful skills in life. So isn't it interesting that what do you think accounts for this really big disparity in how, you know, two different people can view the same thing in this instance?
And yeah, I feel it really has to do with the stereotype, right? The conventional wisdom around video games that, what there's just so much discourse online and in person about limiting screen time. Don't let your kid play these video games, and I think what that is it really is just absorbing and spouting that conventional wisdom. And for me, I love the idea of beginner's mind. And whenever there's something that my child is doing that I'm maybe worrying about, that I'm uncomfortable with, that I'm feeling a little off about, and definitely video games was one when my kids were younger. When I could say, okay, now, this is making me uncomfortable. I understand that. But I also don't need to just shut it down immediately. I can get curious. I can hit that beginner's mind mindset and just think, okay, like they are loving doing this thing. What the heck is it that they love about it? What is bringing them joy? What is bringing them that determination? What are they getting out of it? And through that, you're going to learn what they're learning because we're learning all the time, right? Whenever we engage in a thing that we want to engage with, we're learning, we're figuring things out. So, what is it that right now they are willing to put so much time and effort into. And what out of that do they celebrate?
Mm,
Because that helps us know who that person is and where they are right now and what it is they're learning and they're wanting to learn and that they're curious about. Because you know what? That is where the best learning happens,
mhm,
right? When we're curious, when we're engaged, like we're learning stuff. So for me, what happened was when it's like, okay, I'm going to make this a little project for myself. I'm going to say, okay, yes, this is uncomfortable, but a few more weeks, months isn't going to be the end of the world. What if I just get curious and say, what the heck are they getting out of it? Why did they love this so much? Basically, that's why did they love this thing so much? And then from there, I started to see because I I just made sure to do the work that I didn't bring my expectations with me. I didn't use the lens of judgment looking at the things they were doing, going, oh my gosh, this is so boring. Oh my gosh, we're playing this again. No, I want to look for new language. I want to look for their language. I want to learn, how are they seeing it? How are they talking about it? What is, bringing them back to it time and time again? What is challenging to them? Because, people don't like to do things for an extended period of time that are boring. They like to live at kind of the edge of the challenge, something that's not so hard that they're never going to be able to figure it out where they are, or so easy that it's going to be boring. So when they keep going back to that video game, it's on the edge there of a challenge for them that they want to accomplish.
mhm,
So that was kind of how I went into it, was just, what can I learn? And for me, I think that difference for people who are stuck just in the judgment phase, that's the difference for the people who have moved into, oh, I can see what they're getting out of it. I can understand that this is a valid interest and it's an interesting interest. And even if I'm not gonna play or I don't want to play as much as my child does, I can still understand why they enjoy it and I can still connect with them over that. So really, I think it's just that step of doing the work to be respectful and understand, okay, like what is it about this? What do you love about this? And then for me, it just like opened up my eyes when I decided to go through that process. And I've done it with video games, I've done it with other interests my kids have had over the years. And time and again, never once have I walked away and said, the thing that they're interested in is invalid. And I feel like I need to stop it, right? I just learned so much and realized that it was really just my stereotypical first impression of the thing
mhm,
that was just getting in my way. I just needed to learn more about it.
mhm. So this might be a good time to look at a diagram you created about because I mean, maybe tell us a little bit about, because I think in your book you mentioned your professional career before, getting into education and all that was it software engineering or
I did end up doing it. I was actually a nuclear
oh,
engineer,
nuclear
worked at
engineering?
a nuclear plant, but yes, very quickly ended up doing a lot of software development for them. So I'm kind of
Okay.
working at that systems interface.
Yes, because the diagram totally reminds me of like kind of breaking down,
This,
uh, you know, uh, software algorithm. But anyway, so if you could screen
bring
share
that up.
us and show us what you diagrammed once you took a closer look at what was it one of your children specifically was doing with video games?
Yeah, this was my oldest child. This was he was nine and 10 when he came home from school when we discovered homeschooling. And he had the time now to dive into video games. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a lot of time. And I had all those messages, of screen time and video games and everything in my head, rolling around in my head. So I did exactly what I was talking about. I was like, okay, they love this for a reason. What is it? Like, because stopping them was a really big negative in our relationship, right? It was some like if when I tried to get him to move on to something else before, if I it's like, oh, it's been this long, or wait till, a certain time before you start playing, like all those pieces were just rubbing so badly in our relationship.
Mhm.
So that was part of the reason why I was like, okay, I got to get curious about this. I got to learn more. I got to not just say he's playing video games for hours a day. And so over those, it only took a couple of months. So I would hang out with him more. I would watch him play. I would happily go and help him figure, because he really enjoyed RPGs. I would happily go find game guides on the internet and read through them and help him get through parts of the games that were stopping him up. And basically, I just saw so much that he was navigating and learning, right? So, as I said, reading, like there are facts and guides and message boards, reviews about games when deciding what games he wanted to play, fan fiction, because when you like a game world so much, he would start finding fan fiction that was written about it and reading that as well. So, like, there's a lot of homeschooled kids where the parents talk about how their kids learn to read through video games. Words are words, whether they're in a book or they're in a video game, right? So however you're engaging and seeing words, you can learn to read that way. Message boards, that was where, you're stuck and people would go and ask questions, and we'd find out how to move through. And then we would use those if we couldn't find actual walkthroughs.
Mhm.
And from that reading, then he got into story analysis, right? Because as I said, he was into the role-playing games, and the worlds that were there, and these big, 60-hour games that had deep stories in them. So we would have lots of conversations about characters and plots and what was going on and how did the game create that suspense? When did the game decide to make this reveal? And that's where the music, the visuals, like all those pieces came into our conversations. That, the research skills, because finding all these different bits of information was super, it's just a skill you pick up while you're trying to find information, right?
Mhm.
So, and then that got into evaluate, like when you look at all these skills, so many of these skills, they don't have to do with video games per se. These are skills that a person is developing and they bring with them. Video games just happens to be the tool right
Mhm.
now that they're loving to pick up these skills. Yeah, I've seen it in my other kids. Like my daughter's big interest for a few years was Harry Potter. She picked up a lot of these same skills through the lens of Harry Potter,
Mhm.
right? So when they don't have these skills yet, the reading, the writing, the social, the research, like learning about himself there down on the left, like how do I deal with frustration, self-confidence, figuring something out and getting through, being able to express himself, frustrate, like all those pieces that they learn when they're engaged in something that they're interested in.
Mhm.
Right? So yes, video games is
Mhm.
something that a lot of kids are interested for a certain season, some much longer than others. But whatever it is, through the lens of the thing that they're passionate about, they can pick up
Mhm.
so many of these skills that they will bring with them. So
Mhm.
again, writing, he decided to learn to type for an MMO that he wanted to try out. And that was like couple of weeks and he was typing away without a problem. And so because I was doing that stuff for him first, but then when he wanted to play an MMO, well, that was more real time, right? So he wanted to pick up that skill. And that was so interesting to see. And then on the left there, more the topics like mythology, different languages. He ended up playing, importing and playing a lot of Japanese games at the time. So he was reading Japanese pretty well. That got him into reading some manga, watching anime. Like you remember how I was talking about before, related interests, that the thing that he's loving, which is the stories, there's other ways that he can immerse himself in stories as well. So manga got added in, anime got added in. It's just fascinating to see all the different places that my kid loves video games
Mhm,
can take you when you actually pay attention to what they're doing and
mhm,
see what it is that they're doing and see the bits that light them up. This would be very different for someone who really loves like platformer video games.
mm,
There'd still be the reading pieces, there'd still be the research pieces, there'd still be some data management and stuff in there. And again, writing, engaging, and the social aspect with other people, because then they're going to start watching maybe they watch other YouTubers who love to do Let's Plays on their genre of games that they love. And then they're in the comments, reading comments, maybe posting comments. So now they're writing. I think sometimes when we don't value
mm,
the interest, we don't value the reading that comes along with it. We don't value the writing. Like the idea of writing is to communicate. Now, when you have a question about how you're stuck in a video game, you want to write that clearly enough so that the answers you get back are actually useful. And maybe the first few times you post questions, it's like, well, that didn't answer my question. That didn't answer my question, which is totally fine. But what they're learning is I need to word my question better. Like they pick that up and then they're pouring through different things to figure things out. They're asking, they're having conversations. All these skills just are so valuable to them as a person. And whether they learn them through video games or learn them through something else, I'm gonna stop. I was gonna say it doesn't matter, but actually, if you're if your child is learning to read through things that are not interesting to them, it's gonna be harder,
mhm,
right? When a child is doing something that they're interested in, something that they enjoy, the learning, like all this learning, I wouldn't have gone up to him and said, "Oh, do you know how much story analysis you've been learning after our conversation through our conversations?" No, because this is all it's just picked up because they're trying to accomplish their goal,
mm,
right?
mhm,
Of
mhm.
getting to the next level
Yeah.
or of whatever their goal in the game is. But they are learning all this stuff to accomplish that. And it is sticking with, like, this learning makes so much sense to them and it stays with them
Mhm,
because of the emotion, because of the engagement. Like you have such deep engagement when you're doing something you're interested in versus something somebody else is telling you you have to do.
mhm,
It
mhm,
is harder to learn when
mhm,
you're doing something somebody else is telling you you have to do, right? So, like being able to sink into their interest, uh, these are all so many things that they can pick up. They can pick up history, history of maybe the era that the game is set in, or the history of the game developer who did it, or like of the story. Like there are just so many aspects. And to know your child, to know, oh, they're really loving history. I'm noticing that the games they're playing are all set in historical times, right?
mm,
Which historical times? Are they really into war games? Are they into like Age of Mythology, which is why you see mythology there because Age of Mythology was a favorite game at the time that we were diving into. And there were all sorts of information about the various gods and different mythologies. So, if you can just hit that beginner's mindset for a while and see what it is that your child is loving, it's so hard to then go back to saying my kid plays video games all the time because you're just excited about all the things that they're doing and all the pieces that they're loving, and that is now what you see. It's like, once you see it you can't unsee it, I think.
And so this also reminds me of something that someone who runs an interest-based school in the Netherlands, a very different type of school, project-based and based on around interests, once put it to me. He said, in real life, or outside of a conventional classroom type of learning, um, the test comes first and then the learning. And that's what I'm seeing here and hearing you describe, they'll get the child will reach a certain level and then can't go any further. There's the test, they just failed it. So now they have to learn how to get past it. um, and so, anyway, it just kind of reminded me of that framing of learning and how it happens, for most of us, most of the time. I mean, because of course we're all still learning also. Um, and
I love that. I
and
do. I love that. That's the interesting piece, right? Like, how do adults learn?
mhm,
How do we like to learn? It's when we bump up against something that we want to do and we don't know how, or we don't have enough skill for it, then we pick it up and learn it. Then it's
yeah,
meaningful to us. Then it helps us make progress versus like, you'll need to know this someday. It's
right.
really hard to
Right.
remember, right?
For instance, in a meta sense, adults learning about video games. You've just described a whole learning journey that adults can go on, and kind of demonstrate, how one learns in the process, model learning and being curious about something. So, anyway, another thing that came to my mind while you were speaking is I recall reading, hearing about whatever, that when books became more commonly available, like now books are venerated, like read books, the libraries are, having all these reading challenges over the summers and just read books. Parents all want their kids to read books. But apparently this was not the universal kind of attitude toward books, when they first became widespread. And I think there are certain parallels in how a lot of parents viewed books when they first became, widely available, that kids were wasting their time with their noses in books, spending hours and hours in these imaginary worlds where when they, could be doing real things, with concrete objects and with each other and so on. And there's a certain parallel, which is really interesting because now books are absolutely worshipped by most parents, and video games are the boogeyman. So,
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that happens with any, large kind of technological change. Like when books came in, yes, people were so worried that people would lose the ability to remember things, right? There was a lot of oral tradition and a lot of information was passed down orally. It's like, oh my gosh, if they have books where it's written, we're going to lose the ability to
mhm,
remember all this
mhm.
stuff and bring it with us. And then, yes, I mean, I was as a child, my parents would be like, stop reading, go outside and play. But yeah, it's fascinating to see, and it is, I think, a very apt parallel because it's just not yet understanding the the positives, or like it's really just another, it's a tool. Like books were a tool to help us remember things. Books were a tool so that we could more easily, dive into an imaginary world rather than, having to show up somewhere with a storyteller to tell you these stories. So it makes it more available. Same with the video games. Like it's a fascinating meld, of technologically, of now you have sound, which you don't have in reading books, and you've got visuals, which you don't have in reading books, right? So even within platformers, even within MMOs, there is story. Like story is for human beings. I love that quote. I won't remember who it was, but like story is for humans, like water is to fish. You don't like
Mm.
kind of know that it's there, but it is just how we move through the world, right? So it's
Mm.
just a really fun way that just brings more aspects, brings it to life more than a book. But it hasn't stopped my kids from reading books either, It's just, it's a tool. It's a fun way to engage in it.
So let's talk about, are there any negatives? I mean, some negatives that I have heard expressed, in addition to um, that, it's taking away time from other things. Although, I mean, that's a bit of a can be a bit of a judgment thing. What is more worthwhile versus less worthwhile? But of course, there are certain things like, you know, losing a lot of sleep, staying up really late because you can't stop playing, or you feel compelled, like that they're made to be addictive, and so it encourages children to overlook their physical needs, to overlook, their family and friends or whatever, and become kind of escape into video games at the cost of other things that are perceived to also be important and valuable for them. There's also kind of the eyesight, I think, concern of, focusing at the same focal length for long periods of time and what that does to eyesight. There's the posture, sitting for long periods of time without breaks and so on. So, how do you kind of think about those things?
For me, really, like what underlies all of that is that trust that I was talking about earlier, is having that trusting relationship with your child such that they don't think that your goal is and your goal isn't to stop them, right? It is to help them engage in the thing and enjoy the thing that they like to do.
Mhm.
And that they are having a lot of fun doing, that is challenging them in just the right way, that they want to, keep at it, accomplish what it is ever that they're trying to accomplish. But once you have that like level of trust that they know you're not trying to stop them, but they can say, "Oh, my back is sore." Right? And you can have that conversation, "Oh, my eyes are stinging." And you can talk about looking up for a little bit, going outside for a few minutes. Like when they know you're not trying to stop them, you're just trying to help them move through, do the thing that they want without, because they don't want to injure their body, but they really like the thing they're doing. But so finding ways to weave them together rather than, because once you set it up as an either or, your or is gonna, lose, right? They're gonna want to like, okay, keep playing or come outside. Really, you need to come outside. It's good for you. It's healthy. They're gonna be, unhappy to have to stop their game to do that. But when you're having a conversation with them and they trust that you want them to be able to do the thing that they like to do, you can have those conversations about things, maybe they don't get sore, but there's a good chance they do. Or maybe you're like, oh, I want to set you up a great spot to play, and you get a ergonomic gaming chair. Like you can support them in doing these things that they want to do, and also in that safety aspect. But if you don't have that level of trust, it's hard to have those kind of conversations where they don't feel like they're trying to be controlled and stopped. Like they're not going to come to you and say, my back is sore, when the only solution you have for a sore back is stop playing. There are so many other ways that you can address that challenge, right? But if the answer to everything they bring to you is stop playing, they're not going to come to you and have those conversations, right? They're not going to mention those things. So it is fundamentally that relationship and all those things like, okay, I have stayed up very late reading a new book that came out. And I was tired the next day. That's, so our kids stay up late and find that they're tired the next day. Again, you can have those conversations when they're not fearing or worrying that your solution to them being tired the next day is stop playing the video games earlier or whatever. If it's loud and if they stay up later and you go to bed and it's loud, that's a conversation. It's like, we're asleep, how can we set it up so that you're not waking people up when if you continue to play? Maybe it's headphones for them, maybe it's a closed door, maybe it's being on another floor. Like there are so many possibilities when what we're trying to accomplish is both things. I
Mhm.
want you to feel healthy and I want you to be able to do the thing you like to do. Like, how can we make both those things? Once you make it an either or, like they're not going to talk to you. They don't want to listen to you because they feel all you're trying to do is stop them, stop them, stop them.
Mhm.
Right? So you can't have those kind of conversations. And again, those skills. Just think of those skills moving forward. They're working at a job 8 hours at a desk and their back is sore.
Mhm.
No, all I can do is quit my job or I have a sore back. No, there are so many possibilities in there. So if over the years you guys have worked together to work through challenges and find a path that hits all the notes
Mhm.
or as many of the notes as possible, they know that it's possible. It's like, oh, I'm missing something here. What else could I do? What are the possibilities? Back to beginner's mind, back to brainstorming, back to looking at all the pieces and it's like, how can we hit as many of the pieces of the context of this situation, find something that we can move forward that hits the most of them,
Mhm.
right? Like these are such valuable skills for them to learn. And when we're there with them, we can, share our ideas. We can support them. We can help them figure out the ways to process through it. And then they take that skill with them moving forward.
And you mentioned an interesting thing about, I mean, as adults, we've stayed up late doing, whatever that we were into. Um, so maybe part of the resistance of many to listen to their parents talking about how they don't want them to get addicted to video games is if they see their parent looking addicted to their computer or their phone.
Road. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Like, and that's why it's just so valuable to open up and open up your mind, right? And just like rather than getting fixated on video games is a problem. Like, okay, they are enjoying this so much. What is it that they're enjoying?
Mm,
And then even if we don't like that game per se, we can meet them, we can connect with them. Like, oh my gosh, I love this thing as much as you love that
mm,
thing.
mhm,
And then you can start to see the parallels. You can, connect with them through oh, I found it so hard to, put my book away or to, I wanted to go on this long, like whatever your interest is, think about it through your lens. Think about that interest. Again, as you mentioned right at the beginning, the judgment, like not judging an interest, like their interest in that thing is as deep and engaging as my interest in this thing.
mhm.
Or maybe you discover you haven't got an interest that you're that deeply engaged in, and it's like, oh, I wish I had something I love that much.
Well, it's interesting also because I mean, I think a lot of I would guess a lot of adults do feel some sense of addiction to screens or social media or what have you, where some of the decision making almost feels out of their hand, like they're just feeling compelled, like Pavlov's dogs, and I mean, they are certain platforms are made to kind of encourage that kind of kind of the slot machines at the casino kind of same thing, like you just get into this like, zone. And so what
And
about the aspect that maybe some of that is just like hard to stop, not necessarily because it's adding more value than other things would be adding, but because it's just hard to stop.
those are amazing conversations. Like we had so many conversations over the years and continue to have them about, how the games pull you back, how they set up. The whole like loot box controversy that's been going on for a few years now, how those pull people and kids and adults into video
Right.
games, into spending, more money once you're inside the games for online games, right? Um, But absolutely, like how we can have that conversation with them, how we can say, oh my gosh, oh, I just noticed that I was scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and half an hour went by. I can just share that, like narrating the bits of our life, and then go, oh my gosh, I felt that too. I was playing this game, and then like 3 hours went by and I didn't accomplish anything. I just got stuck like doing whatever. And and it will be different because what will feel like somebody might feel when they did the same thing that they accomplished. I spent 2 hours creating my character. If they loved those 2 hours, it's like, oh, look, like they enjoy creating a persona. They enjoy that aspect where someone else could be like, I spent 2 hours looking through all the outfits that I could buy. And, I just feel like my time was wasted.
Mm,
So it's very individual as to what feels like wasted time and
mhm,
what feels like accomplishing, like fun, engaging time. So again, that's why having these conversations where you can have that trust and that level of conversation with your child. But yes, if we're noticing things, we can mention them. Like, and especially, I think it's especially helpful to mention them from our perspective to say, like, oh my gosh, I got caught up in this thing. And I don't feel so good about it. And they don't need to engage right there, but you've shown them like this happens to adults too.
mhm,
It's okay that it happens to you. And, maybe next time they'll come and mention it
mhm,
and say, "Oh, yeah, that happened to me too. I got stuck doing this thing." And then maybe next time you're like, "Oh, you know what I did? I'm gonna try, when I open a social media thing, I'm gonna set my little timer on my phone to 20 minutes or 10 minutes or a half an hour, like whatever feels good to me right now,
mhm,
just to remind me to think, oh, do I still want to be here?"
mhm,
Right?
mhm,
So, and just share with what you're trying to
mhm,
do to help yourself through that. Because reminding ourselves that it really is our choice. We really, yes, they want to keep us scrolling and scrolling. And yes, in games, they want to keep us playing and playing. Totally true, but it still is our choice,
mhm,
right? So to be able to talk about how companies do that
mhm,
is very interesting. To be able to be doing it alongside them, like it's not the video game, right? It can definitely be your social media or your app, like whatever app maybe that of something that you're super interested in, you're fine. It's all about, how are we feeling? Are we feeling comfortable? Are we really enjoying it? Or are we starting to feel uncomfortable?
mhm,
Maybe not even in the moment, but later we go, oh man, I ended up playing all day and I didn't get to go to the park, something that I
mhm,
really wanted to do.
mhm,
And you can commiserate. This doesn't mean it was wrong. It doesn't mean it was bad. It's now a new piece of information they have and you have. And it's like, oh, you want to be able to, would it help if tomorrow we go to the park first thing in the morning? Then you've got that done and you've been able to enjoy that. And then,
mhm,
or do we want to set an alarm? Or do you want to finish a certain level and then we go? Like again, there's no right, wrong, one answer. It is like, let's play with it's the context of the people. It's the context of the things that we're experiencing and the things we want to do
All
and
right.
reminding ourselves that we have the choice.
All right. And just one last thing. I think one of the reasons why parents, have a lot of angst about their kids spending a lot of time on video games is that they extrapolate in a linear fashion and imagine that their kids will be 30, 40, years old and still doing exactly this with, nothing else in their lives. So, did your children are your children still playing spending as much time on video games now that they're grown? Let's just, revisit that.
Let's revisit that. Um, I mean, you could certainly, I would say no. I mean, one is a video game developer now.
Aha.
Um, Another one is a stunt actor, and enjoys playing games. My daughter's a photographer. She's been liking VR. You know, so the games are just still fun and part of their life. We play a ton of board games too. D&D, like fun and games games are a part of our lives, but no, they haven't become where they're the only thing in their lives to the detriment of the
Mhm,
rest of their
mhm,
lives. And really, the escapist, like using it as an escape, I mean, that's a good clue that the rest of your life, it would be very helpful to just look at that now. You
mhm,
know, if you hate your job, but you feel you're stuck there, so
mhm.
you come home and you play video games where it feels fun, where you feel you have control, right? You have control of your character. You can go and do interesting things. So often, like I feel like it's a control thing when they don't feel like they have a lot of control in the rest of their life. So that is the reason
Yeah,
that they're going to that. It doesn't mean stop it. That's not a good reason. It means let's also look at the rest of your life and see, well, you know, how can we figure things out there so you don't feel so helpless
right.
and out of control in the rest of your life.
Integrated, basically integrated into your life, but not be your life. All right. Well, this is a good stopping place. We've covered a lot of ground. Hopefully, it's been interesting to people listening to this and kind of thinking about things from some other perspectives. And thank you for spending the time, Pam.
Oh, thanks so much, Luba. It was really fun. I enjoyed our conversation.
Bye.